Thanks for joining me. I'm Anthony from Anthony's Creative Classroom, and we are going to be working on backgrounds tonight. And I had enough stuff that I wanted to teach you that this will end up having a part 2 somewhere down the road. So I'm going to show you some things tonight, and I'm going to save some things for the next time we do this, because there's just so much to play with building a background. So I'm going to move this out of the way, and then some of the things that we're going to use tonight are sitting here on the table. We got some old Stampers Anonymous stamps I'm going to use. Some paint, some stencil butter, which I think might be new to a lot of you. White pigment ink, a brayer and a Kaleidacolor pad, and some distress ink. We're going to do some ink blending and a whole bunch of other stuff. So let me clear some of this out of the way. So the first thing I'm going to show you is inking something that you've put through an embossing folder. So I have a piece of craft cardstock, and as you can see, I embossed it already. Very easy. You just have to watch which side is the side you want to ink. So you want to look for the raised pattern versus the debossed side. So I'm just going to use a light touch, and I'm using a white ink pad. So all you're going to do is lightly just rub across the raised part and spin it around. So it's as heavy as you want it to go, but it's better to build up than just press down with the pad. And a little bit's going to get in the background, but that's okay. So simple, easy thing to do. The thing you have to do with, because it's pigment ink, let it dry or heat it. I'm just going to let it dry on its own, and I'm going to lift it up a little bit higher to the camera so that you can see. And what I'm going to do so you see the difference, I'm going to put some ink on the other side as well, just so you can see what happens when you ink the back side. So when you ink the back side, it's just as cool, but you're inking the background of it, the smooth side, as opposed to the raised side. So it all depends on what you really want to do with it. Hey Debbie. Hey Peg. So simple, easy thing. It's even cool. I didn't have one out anywhere today to grab a 3D embossing folder, and that's even more intense because you get multiple layers. So here's the back of the card, the deboss side. You can see the pattern is set in versus this way, the pattern is raised up. So I'm going to show you a finished one of these that I mounted on some paper. So here it is, just on some black and another piece of craft paper, and lift it up closer to the camera so you can see it a little better. So this is the white pigment ink on the craft. Now I wanted to see what it looked like on black, and I wanted a different look to it. So I grabbed my Faded Jeans Oxide ink pad, and this is what I got on the black. It's so cool on the black. So this is raised embossing folders with just rubbing ink across. Easy peasy. Need a fast card. Again, with the oxide ink, you could wet it, let it do its thing, but then the water is going to just make the ink rub down into the spaces in the embossing folder. So I didn't do that. I used my heat gun on both of these to let them dry. And then I just set them off to the side after I did this. So easy thing to do with an embossing folder. So And the next thing we're going to do is we are going to do some rainbow ink blending. So I have my cardstock, and I'm going to use some distress inks. I've got mustard seed, fired brick, and salty ocean. And I like to do my rainbow blending starting in the middle because I always end up not leaving myself enough room to get all my colors on because of the way I blend. Just going to grab a darker piece of paper to put behind so you can see easier what I'm doing. So I've got my blending brushes, and you can use a sponge, you can use like the Tim Holtz tool, like this, whatever you want to use. I just had these brushes were already with these colors inked, so I just grabbed those brushes. But like I said, I start in the middle only because I never leave room. So I'm going to start with my yellow, and I'm going to blend through the middle. And I spin it around because I get a lot of ink on the edges so that I can balance it out. And I want to come down a little bit, like take 2/3 out of the middle with my color. Okay, so there's my yellow. And I may come back and add a little bit more after, but we're going to continue on with the red. I'm going to start at the end and get my color on. And I'm going to start making my way into the middle. And I'm very heavy-handed when it comes to this, so I'm going to show you how to, if you get blotches like this, pick up some more ink and then just come side by side and it kind of blends it out a little bit. But I need to come up into the yellow a little bit more because I need some orange in my rainbow. Okay, and it's kind of red, so I'm going to come back to the yellow and add some more yellow back on top of the red to make this a little bit more orange. And if you don't have distress pads and you have a different brand of ink pads, as long as they're dye-based ink pads, they're going to do the job for you. You could do this with Memento. You could do this with, if you have Stampin' Up! Dye inks, you could do it with those. So you're not limited to just doing this with distress ink. So I'm going to start with my blue on this end. Am I still in the camera? And I'm just using a Post-it note to help me hold on to the paper. And now you can see I'm starting to get some green. So if you think of making colors you want to make, as long as you have a blue, a red, and a yellow, you can make whatever colors you want. Now I can come down over the red and add some blue, and I'm going to get some purple. Think of your inkjet printer. Those are the 3 colors of ink that you buy for your printer. So there you go. So there's my background. Move this out of the way so you can see a little better. So here's my background. Now, because it's distress ink, I can mist it with water and get a little bit more pattern to my paper. So I'm just going to give it a quick little mist. And you can see how this paper is starting to speckle. I'm going to dry this real quick. Sorry for the noise. And when you wet paper, it's important to dry it from both sides because the water is going to soak into the paper. And I did not use watercolor paper. I just grabbed a piece of 80-pound cardstock, and this actually feels like it's 65, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. So now I want to stamp on here. I'm going to take this big stamp. I'm going to ink it with Memories black ink, and my ink pad is brand new, so you don't need to press real hard if you have a new pad, and just tap the ink. And then I'm going to turn my paper because I like to stamp sideways when I'm using a big stamp. And I'm going to press. So there's my stamped image. Nice black vibrant on this rainbow background. And because of the paper, this purple part down here is going to get just about cut off anyway. So because my paper was longer than a quarter sheet. And if you can see that your ink has a little bit of shine to it, you want to heat it just a little bit so it doesn't smear. So I'm going to move this out of the way. So here's the one we just did with our inks. And this is the finished card. And I did some vintage photo around the edges. So, and it's just, I stamped it the opposite way. I put the blue at the top. So there's no right or wrong, but this is the finished card. And I used some holographic paper around the edges and then mounted it on black. So that's that easy to ink blend paper. You can ink blend on white, cream, can ink blend on a tag. If you're using the oxide version of these pads, you can ink on black paper. So let me show you that real quick, how much they show up on a piece of black. And I'm just going to rub this one pad that I have out on the black paper so you can see how the oxide inks show up on black. So you could do the same thing with the oxide pads on the black paper. I have two oxide pads. I have a blue and I have a vintage photo, and that's it. So I like the original ones better, and I have I could take stock in distress pads because of teaching. So so far that's quick. We've done two backgrounds. We did the ink blending, and we did the inking on the embossing folder. And we've been online for like 12 minutes. So both of these are fast techniques when you need a quick card. Some of the other ones we're going to do are going to take a little bit longer, but we're going to just keep marching along. Clear this out of the way. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, so the next one I'm going to do for you is something new to most of you probably. And we are going to stencil butter. So stencil butter is a paste. It's very soft and it's very easy to use. It has the texture of snack pack pudding. So the colors we're going to use today is Green Pear, Sunshine, and Pink Lemonade. So I've got my paper and I'm going to put my stencil down. And a tip for your stencils, if you have stencils that have edges that are sticking up, just flip your stencil upside down. It won't matter, and those sticking up little tiny spots on your stencils will stay flat and you won't have a problem. And I am also going to tape it down to my paper. So I'm just using a little bit of painter's tape to tape the stencil down to the paper. So with the stencil butter, this is another thing. I like to start in the middle of my stencil. I don't know why I like start in the middle of things. I'm also that person that reads a magazine from the back, so I'm just a little weird that way. And I stuck my thumb in the jar. So all I'm going to do is pick up some stencil butter on the back of my palette knife, and I'm going to zoom in so you can see a little better what I'm doing. Move this up so I'm more in camera, and I'm just going to press it through the stencil. And you can put it wherever you want to put it. If you go back, you get some more of the product off the palette knife. So I kind of like just try and push it flat so I don't have any big sticking up edges off my stencil. And then I'm going to put the lid back on real quick so it doesn't dry. And I'm going to grab a baby wipe and just wipe off my palette knife and move on to the next color. The other thing, the colors blend a little bit with this. So you can see I don't have very much on the knife. So I'm just going to spread. It's better to start out with a small amount than to like overload your palette knife. So I'm going to wipe off my palette knife and go into the third color. Sorry about the weird scraping noise. Because I have some yellow on here from picking up from scraping, I'm not going to wipe this off into my jar. But I am going to look to see if I have any spots that I missed and come in and put some more in the slots. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to wipe off my palette knife. And then this is what I get. And you can see the shimmer already in it. I'm going to throw this out because it's got ick on it. And then this is a finished card I did earlier. And I just put the product in different places. So no two are going to come out exactly the same. When I do this, I work on a half a sheet of cardstock so that I have plenty of room to tape my stencil down. You can do this with a 6x6 stencil. You can do this with just a partial stencil on a corner if you're doing like a mixed media tag and you just want it in little places, or you can just put some here and move it to another spot on the tag. So that is stencil butter. You can dry stencil butter, and I will dry this one so you can see what it does when it gets heated. I just have to use the louder heat gun, so if you want to hit your mute for a second, and I'll wave when I'm done, because then you can see what it does, because it will bubble up when it dries. But I need to use the bigger heat gun to dry this. Okay, I'm not going to dry the whole thing, but I'm going to lift these up towards the camera. This one, you can see how it's very smooth. When you heat it, you can see how it bubbles up and changes the texture. Both are fine, you just have to let it cool off once it's done, so you can do it both ways. So this is let to air dry, and it takes maybe 15 minutes for this to dry because I don't put the paste on real thick. So here you can see that it's raised up and it's already cool and dry to the touch. So it's really a cool product. Okay, so I'm going to set this off to the side and we're going to move on to the next thing. Okay, I think we're going to do some paper piecing next. So I'm going to show you the finished card first so you can see where we're heading. So here's the card. I'm going to move the camera down just a little bit more. So when I did this, I picked a focal point out of my printed paper for this. So I have my square and I have my piece of white paper. Now what I like to do when I do a card like this is I'm not going to sit here and put adhesive on everything all night long because I will be here all night long. I grab my 4-inch wide score tape and I just put a piece on the whole thing. I'm going to line up one edge and press it down. And then I'm going to take my knife and just cut it off the roll. Zoom zoom out just a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to come and cut these edges off. Okay, now it looks like I have a piece of coated cardstock, but I don't. But what I do need to do is take my bone folder and make sure it's completely sealed to the paper and I don't have any air bubbles. And then I'm going to peel back the liner off my score tape. And now my whole paper is adhesive. So I don't have to get the tape runner out or the bottle of glue or anything like that. So then I'm going to take my focal point and I'm going to put it in the center as a diamond. And if it's not exact in the center, that's okay. And then I have some 1/4 inch black strips that I cut to frame in my center. So I'm going to line up this end of the strip even with the end of the block and butt it up against it, and then I'm going to do all 4 sides of it. Okay, and then I'm just gonna, you can either use your knife or your scissors. I'm gonna use my scissors actually instead of the knife. Flip it over and just cut these off. And this one's got just a little bit hanging out there. Okay, then I'm going to take, I have 1/4 inch strips and I have 1/2 inch strips. Some are solid, some are patterned. So then I'm going to take and I'm going to put a wide solid here, and I'm just going to tear it off because I'm going to use the other half of it opposite. Then I'm going to put a solid here, and a solid here. Okay. And then you just continue on and lay the patterns out however you want. Around your piece. And then you can put some opposite directions, and this, as you fill this in and keep trimming off the edges, you're going to end up with this, and then I mounted it onto a piece of black. So let me just cut these off real quick. And then I can go this way into my corners. And over here on this side, because I only have this little bit, I'll probably just tear a little piece off instead of having the whole thing hanging off right there. So, and I would keep trimming as I go around. My center square was 2 by 2. And I was working on a quarter sheet of, actually that piece of cardstock was 4 by 5 1/4. So what do I want to do next? I think we're going to do a background, and the background is created with white cardstock and embroidery floss. And I'm using this bright pink embroidery floss so that you can see what I'm doing. So if you don't have embroidery floss, it's very cheap. And it's great to use on your cards also when you want to use like baker's twine or something and you can't find the right baker's twine. The other thing you need for this project is an 1/8 inch hole punch. And I'll explain why as we're going along. Just need a sip of coffee real quick. Okay. So, and you need some Scotch tape. So what I did first is I took a piece of cardstock and I traced around it with my pencil. So here's my piece of white cardstock with my pencil traced around it. So now I'm going to take my hole punch and I'm going to try and stay on the pencil line all the way around, and I'm going to randomly punch holes around the cardstock. Yes, I am a little nuts, and there is a method to my madness here, everybody, which you'll see in a moment. Okay. So I got all my holes punched. So now I'm going to take my scissors and cut on the pencil lines because I want to cut all the holes in half, or at least cut them open. Okay, so there I've cut off all my little strips, and now I have half holes all the way around. Okay, so I'm going to take my embroidery floss and I'm going to pull a long string off of it to begin with. And I'm going to take a little piece of Scotch tape. And because I don't want it to be real sticky, I'm going to put it on my pants for a second, pull up some fuzz and take some of the sticky away. And I'm going to tape this down to the back. So now I'm going to go to the front and I'm just going to randomly wrap the embroidery floss around a piece of cardstock. Here, and here, and right here. So now I'm going to come back and I'm going to tape this down again. Rub the tape on my pants and pull this back here and tape it down and then cut that off. Okay, so here is my background. Now I'm going to take 3 different colors of Memento ink. I've got a yellow, an orange, and a red. So now I'm going to start with my yellow. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And I am going to just go direct to paper with my ink pad. And get some yellow ink put down. You can use to get into the smaller spaces, you can use a finger and just press the corner of the ink pad down. Okay, so then I'm going to grab my orange. Ooh, my string slipped. Hold on, let me put some tape on that. Pull it tight on the back and tape it back down. Not exactly where it was, but we're going to make it work. Get back into a notch here. There. So then I'm going to change color and do the same thing. And if you have the little square pads or the little dewdrops, those will be even better for this technique than using a full-size ink pad. I need to re-ink my dewdrops, so that's why I'm using the full-size pads. Now I'm going in with the red, and I'm going to use the corner to get my red down. So it does take a little bit of pressure because you're have to get ink around these strings. Okay, so now I'm going to put some more yellow down over the top. And I'm going to add one more color just because I can. And I'm going to grab a little bit of magenta. Just to add a little bit more to it. Okay. Now I just need to cut off the strings. And there's my background. Okay, so let me trim this down real quick. then I attached it to some black cardstock. Then you can stamp over it in black. And here's my finished card. I took a flower stamp. And this one's a little lighter. They're all going to come out different. Lines aren't all in the same places. This one could have used another line across here, but easily covered up. And then I have a wooden butterfly in my stash that I just glued down. So let me stamp something over top of this one real quick. I'm going to make this one go sideways because then I can put some ribbon or something on it. So there you go. And this is a cool stamp. I don't know the name of it, but around the stamp, it's a target with an A in the middle and an arrow, and it says aim, aspire, astonish, amaze, and achieve. There you go. So there's, I stamped right over top of it. Now, if you wanted to stamp over this with a pigment ink and then throw some clear embossing powder on it, that would even make it stand out more. But this is what I did for my finished card for my sample. I didn't even color the flowers in, they don't need it. That is card number 4. Okay, so the next project I'm going to do, I need a piece of scrap paper. And I'm using coated cardstock. This cardstock, I'm not sure where I got it. I've had it for a while. It's coated on one side. It's not the best coated cardstock out there. The best coated cardstock I have been able to get my hands on has come from Peddler's Den. So, and the coated cardstock I have from there is coated on both sides. This is single-sided, and I don't know where it came from. I've had it long enough that it's kind of turned a little yellow on the edge. So, but we're going to use my good friend again, the Kaleidacolor pad. So I used Kaleidacolor pads when I did the Stamps by Judith video. I don't know if that was, I think that was last week's video, might have been the week before. So the Kaleidacolor pads are a dye-based ink pad. They come in like 26, 27 different color combinations. And inside, you can see on the package, I have the berry one. And there are 5 different ink pads inside it. You can either use them separated, or you can slide them together to make a connected rainbow pad. When you go to put it away, you cannot put the lid on it unless you separate it, and it keeps your colors from bleeding together. So I'm going to do 2 different backgrounds for you. I'm going to do one vertical and one horizontal with the same ink pad so you can see the difference, and it would depend on which direction the stamp goes that you're going to use. Yes, and I'm wearing ink already, so would not be a crafting night if I wasn't wearing ink. So I'm going to go into, and you can't just go like this to pick up ink because you won't get ink on your whole brayer. So you have to go like this, and the other trick so you don't get specific lines is to move back and forth a little bit. And I like to get my brayer real inked up and juicy for my first pass. And then I'm just going to start at one edge and I'm going to brayer my color onto my coated cardstock. Come back and re-ink and come back again. It's that easy to use these ink pads with a brayer to make a background. So just to give you an idea at some of the color combinations they come in, and we'll go back to what I was doing. I mean, and if you're going someplace and you're just going to make backgrounds, some of these pads and some coated cardstock, you can sit there and make backgrounds all day long. And then you have them ready for when you want to do something else. So I'm going to go back, I'm going to put these back in the drawer real quick. And we're going to go back to what we were just doing. Okay. So here is that one background. Now you see how I've got these lines in it? We're going to try and clean that up a little bit. So I'm going to separate my pad, pick up my color one more time, and I'm just going to do a completely smooth, I'm not going to go back and forth, and just kind of clean that up a little bit. And that just blends out my color. I'm going to get a little bit of color on that top edge, so I'm going to come back with just that end of the brayer with just that color and just do this top edge. Make that a little darker. Okay. So there's my horizontal one. Now I'm going to do another one, and I'm going to go vertical. So I'm going to put my colors back together. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come on a slight, here let me turn my scrap paper over. I'm going to come on a slight angle. So you don't have to do it completely straight on the page. And I'm going to open my pad. I'm going to come over again. And you want to twist the brayer a little bit. Kind of like when you're painting a wall and you don't want to just stay in one spot. Okay. So there's, and I can figure out which way I want my bottom to be. I think I want the darker on the left and the brighter, but you can put it either way you want it. Okay, so I've got my pad separated and I can put my lid on it to put it away. Now I'm going to take that same big stamp we used the first time, and I'm going to use this same stamp again. So I'm going to go back in, pick this up, and then I'm just going to stamp this on my paper. You have to be careful because the stamp could slide when you first put it down. And because it's a big stamp, I'm walking around the stamp with my hands. And this ink, because it's on glossy paper, is never going to dry. So I need to dry it real quick. So bear with me for 1 second with the loud heat gun. There, I think I got it all. And if I didn't, I'll set it off to the side and I'll hit it with a heat gun again in a little bit. So I'm going to set this back here just in case it's still a little wet. So once you have your background, you can die cut on it, you can stamp it, you can run it through an embossing folder. So anything that you're going to do with other cardstock, you can do with this. It's just a neat way to get a variegated background without using all the blending brushes. I will show you real quick though, because somebody asked a question about having to use the glossy cardstock. So let me grab my ink pad again, and I want to show you what you get if you're not using the glossy or the coated paper. You see all your marks, the colors don't blend at all. I mean, it's not horrible of a background, but if you want this blended look, it will never blend on plain cardstock. So Rita, do you see the difference when you asked about did I have to use the coated cardstock? You don't have to, but you're not going to get this look. So, I mean, I would use this for something, but it just takes more work to get those pads and get the ink transferred off the brayer. This happened in seconds, as opposed to having to work at this. So let me show you real quick. I made some samples earlier today. I'm going to pull this one in here that we just did. And then these are different colors of the Kaleidacolor pads. This one is this one right here. So you get variations of whatever you're going to do with it. Now, if you look at these, let me hold this one up to the camera, and I'm going to hold this one up. So this one was just the ink by itself. This one, I threw clear embossing powder on it before I heated it. So this is the Memories dye ink pad, and this is a great way to get your black ink to set on coated cardstock. Throw clear embossing powder on it and heat it. So you can see the difference, how this is kind of matte and this is shiny. It's because of the embossing powder. I will tell you though, when you do it, you need to use the long heat gun versus this heat gun. This heat gun is for drying. This heat gun is for embossing. The fan is not, see how the tip is so small? It directs the heat. This just blows the heat everywhere. So if you're gonna try and emboss with it, it's gonna take a long time because the heat is not directed anywhere. Yes, I have both. It depends on what I'm doing. If I'm just blending ink, like Distress inks, I'll use this, or if I'm watercoloring or something, I'll use this because it's just going to dry. This has got a higher speed fan and the heat is directed. Only difference in those heat guns. Also, there are refills to fill all these Kaleidacolor pads, but think of it this way. There's like 25, 28, I have lost count because they retired a couple of colors, times 5. So that many re-inkers, it would cost me more to buy the 5 re-inkers to ink this pad than to replace the pad. I want to move on to our last project. And the last project has a few steps, but it's a fun project nonetheless. I'm going to show you the finished card first. And here's the finished card that actually is, actually is a tag. What we're going to do is I'm just using these cheap 50-cent bottle craft paints for this background. So I need some paint, a cheap foam brush, and a couple baby wipes to make this work. And I am going to work on my craft mat just because it's easier to wipe the paint off of it. Let me back up out just a little bit. I have some stuff done. I took a piece of cardboard and I covered it with a piece of the printed paper from that paper pad because I want some of this to show through my paint. It's just a cheap piece of, it's just cardboard that was in between some 12 by 12 paper that I bought somewhere. So I have my tag, it's 3 by 6, and I use my corner chomper and my crocodile to make the holes and to change the shape of my corners. You don't have to do the corners, you could just leave them square. So the first thing I'm going to do is shake up my paints. I'm going to squirt some paint out on my mat. Can always add more paint, less at this point, so I'm not wasting all the paint. And there's some paint. And I'm working with a dry brush. I'm going to come in and grab a little bit of paint, tap some of it off, and add some paint dry brushed over my tag. Dab it off and go into a different color. Come back and tap some of it off. And then just add some of the color onto my tag. And then when I want to thin out the paint, I just pull the paint in one direction to thin it out, and it's almost already dry. I'm going to dab this off before I go into the yellow. Actually, I'm going to clean it off on a baby wipe, because I'm not ready to make that yellow paint green. So I'm just going to then come back and wipe a little bit more on my paper towel. So I'm going to come into the yellow and dab off almost all the yellow. And now I'm going to let my colors mix. A little bit of green, pull some more yellow, a little bit of blue, get some green. And you can sit here and go all day long and keep adding paint till you're happy with the design. All right, so I got a little bit too much yellow on that. I'm going to come back in and add just some more blue over top of it. I'm going to come down here and clean up these marks from my brush. A little bit more paint. I'm going to add a little more purple. Okay, so now I'm done with my painting. So I'll throw that out. Put my tag over here. And just because people will yell at me for being wasteful, come in and grab some more of this paint and just put it on this paper and make another background with it later. I'm just going to set this back here to dry. And I'm going to wipe up all this paint off my mat. Okay, so now what we're going to do, I'm going to hit this with a heat gun real quick just to make sure it's completely dry. So that we can do the next step. Okay. So we took all this time to add paint to our project. Now we're going to take some of it off. I'm just going to grab a damp baby wipe, bring out a lot of the moisture out of it because we just want it damp, and then we're going to rub and remove paint. And I have found that paint rubs off more if you put pressure and push away from yourself. You can see how this paint is coming off and some of my background is starting to show back through. That's what we want. Okay, so you can see here where the pattern is starting to show back through. A little bit up here, some rubbing. Now I'm going to grab my black ink pad, and I have this stamp that has all these cool swirls and stuff in it. It's a great stamp for just filling things in. So I'm going to come in here, spin it around, and grab the other end. And whatever I get is what I get. Okay. So here's my finished tag from all of those steps. You can see where I did some paper piecing, and the tags are similar, but they're not going to be the same. And I did my stamping on this one after I did my paper piecing. You can do it before, after, both ways. But this was the main part of what I wanted to show you, was the paint and the baby wipe to take the paint back off. So that was my goal tonight, was to show you how to make backgrounds, not actually all finished cards, but I do have some finished cards for you, and I'm going to lay them all out. You saw them partially through as we made progress today. And the paper is what led me to these pastel colors tonight. That's what I have for you tonight. Like I said, there are many more background things I want to show you and explain to you. So we will be visiting backgrounds again at some point in the future. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night. Appreciate you spending some time with me.